Hola mga kaedukado! Have you ever paused and asked yourself, why I am here? What is the purpose of life? Honestly, people have been asking these questions for thousands of years. Philosophers spent their life trying to understand human existence, knowledge, and values. And over time, their ideas slowly shape how we understand education today. This is where philosophy of education comes in. It studies the purpose, meaning, and problems of education. It asks questions like, why do educate people? What should teachers teach? And how should students learn? For teachers, it works like a compass that guides how they teach and how they treat their students. Philosophy of education is connected to three branches. First is metaphysics, which studies reality and asks what a human being is.
For example, a teacher asks students to write about who they want to become in the future and why. Students reflect on their dreams and purpose in life.
Second is epistemology, which focuses on knowledge and how students learn.
Another example for epistemology, instead of just explaining the lesson, a teacher lets students conduct an experiment so they can discover the answer themselves.
And lastly, or third, is axiology, which studies values and ethics, or what is considered good and important in life.
Another example for axiology, a student finds a lost wallet in the classroom and returns it to the teacher, showing honesty and good values.
The word philosophy comes from Greek words meaning love for wisdom, while education means to guide and bring out a person's potential. Lastly, philosophy of education reminds us that teaching is not just about sharing information, it is about shaping minds, values, and character. So again, what is philosophy? Yes, correct. It means love of wisdom. Let's give ourselves a philosophy clap. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, fellow, Sufi.
Western philosophy refers to the main school of thought developed in Europe and Western world. These philosophies explore how we know things, what is real, and how we should live. Here are the most important ones. First is idealism. Second is realism. And lastly, pragmatism. First, let's talk about idealism. Idealism is a philosophy that focuses on ideas, values, and the development of the mind. It is connected to the teaching of Plato.
First example is, in a Filipino class, the teacher asks students to read a story and discuss the moral lessons such as honesty, respect, or kindness. Students share their thoughts and reflect on how they can apply these values in their lives. Second example is, the teacher asks students to write a reflection about what being a good student means. Students think deeply about their behavior, responsibilities, and goals. Last example is, in a social studies class, the teacher asks, what is justice and why is it important in society? Students share their opinions and learn to understand different ideas.
Now, let's talk about realism. Realism focuses on facts and learning from the real world. This philosophy is connected to Aristotle.
First example, the teacher brings a real apple to the classroom when teaching about fruits. Students touch, observe, and describe its color, smell, taste, and texture. This helps them learn through direct experience with real objects. Second example is, the teacher brings real coins and paper bills to class when teaching about money. Students use them to practice counting and making change, helping them understand how money works in real life. Last example is when teaching about parts of a plant, the teacher brings a real plant. Students examine the roots, stem, and leaves instead of looking at picture in the book.
Third is a pragmatism. Pragmatism is a philosophy of education that believes learning should be connected to real life and personal growth. There are two important ideas in pragmatism. First is a practical learning, and the second one is experiential learning. First example is budgeting allowance. Here, the student makes a weekly budget plan using their allowance to learn practical math and decision making. Second example is mini business. Here, the students create a small class business like selling snacks to learn about profit, teamwork, and responsibility. Third example is a community problem solving. Here, the students identify a problem in the school or community and suggest practical solutions. And let's proceed to Eastern philosophy of education. It focuses more on teacher-centered learning, where the teacher is the main source of knowledge. First example is teacher explanation and note-taking. Here, the teacher explains the lessons while students listen and take notes. Second example is guided recitation. Here, the teacher asks questions and calls students one by one to answer. First is the Hinduism philosophy in education. It is not only about learning academic subjects, it is also about developing wisdom and good values. First example is reflection. Here, the students write a short reflection about good values like honesty, respect, or kindness. Second example is meditation or quiet time. Here, the students practice short meditation or quiet thinking to develop self-control and focus. Third example is values discussion. Here, the class discusses moral lessons from stories and how students can apply them in daily life. The second one is Buddhism, founded by Siddhartha Gautama or the Buddha, teaches inner peace, wisdom, and compassion. It encourages people to understand their thoughts and actions so they can live peacefully with others. In education, Buddhism focuses on the holistic development of students, including their physical, mental, moral, and intellectual growth.
For example, some teachers start a class with a short moment of silence or deep breathing. This helps students relax, clear their minds, and focus better on the lesson. The idea behind this practice is that when the mind is calm, students can think more clearly and learn more effectively. Another example is when teachers encourage students to solve conflicts peacefully instead of shouting or blaming each other. Students are guided to talk calmly and understand each other's feelings. This practice reflects the Buddhist values of compassion and teaches students how to build positive relationships.
The third one is Confucianism, based on the teaching of Confucius. This philosophy emphasizes respect, discipline, and good moral character. Confucian education teaches that everyone can learn and improve themselves, and that education helps people become responsible and virtuous members of society.
One example of this is when students show respect to their teachers by listening attentively and following classroom rules. This behavior reflects the Confucian belief that respecting authority and valuing education are essential for personal growth. When students respect their teachers, learning becomes more organized and meaningful. Another one is group cooperation during class activities. When students work together, share ideas, and help each other understand the lesson, they are practicing the Confucian value of harmony within a community. This teaches students that learning is not only individual but also a shared responsibility.
The fourth one is tourism, connected to the teaching of Lao Tzu, emphasizes the balance, harmony, and living according to nature. It highlights the idea of yin and yang, which represents balance in the universe. In education, tourism supports gradual and natural learning, where students develop basic skills before mastering more complex knowledge.
For instance, instead of only reading about plants in the textbooks, teachers may allow students to observe real plants or explore the environment. This helps students understand concepts more clearly because they experience them directly.
Zen Buddhism started in China around the 16th century and later spread to Japan where it became an important spiritual and philosophical tradition. Zen Buddhism focuses on meditation, mindfulness, and personal experience to understand truth and develop wisdom. Mindfulness in the classroom. Teacher starts classes with short, quiet, or breathing exercises to help students focus. Another is learning through experience. Students learn through activities, observation, and reflection instead of memorization. Another is self-reflection and learning. Students reflect on their thoughts and experiences to gain deeper understanding. Now let us talk about Christian philosophy. Christian philosophy began with the teachings of Jesus Christ in the first century and later developed through Christian scholars and educators. It emphasizes education that develops both academic knowledge and moral character based on Christian values. An example is teaching moral values. Schools teach values like honesty, kindness, and responsibility. Another is education for service. Students join community service activities to develop compassion and responsibility. Madrasas as learning centers. Madrasas taught religion, mathematics, medicine, and philosophy. Preservation of knowledge, just like how they translated Greek words and expanded knowledge. Another is holistic education. They develop both knowledge and moral character. Now for the last philosophy that we are going to discuss is all about the Saracen philosophy. Saracen philosophy developed in the medieval Islamic world, especially during the Islamic Golden Age from the 18th to 13th centuries. It promotes education that combines religious teachings with scientific and intellectual learning.